The rain fell softly over Manhattan, streaking the windows of the quiet art gallery where Liam Carter stood, staring at a portrait he couldn't let go of. The lights had dimmed. The staff had left. But something about tonight felt unfinished, like a page waiting to be turned. He wasn't just a man of art. At 32, Liam had built a life many dreamed of. Suits tailored to perfection. A penthouse overlooking Central Park. But behind every curated canvas on his gallery walls, he hid a secret too raw to frame. Love for him had once meant weakness. And weakness nearly destroyed him. That's when she walked in. "Elena Brooks," she said, brushing wet strands of hair from her eyes. Her soaked coat clung to her petite frame, and her heels clicked against the hardwood floor like she belonged here. "I'm sorry, I saw the light. I didn't know anyone was still in." Liam turned, almost annoyed. But then he saw her face. He'd seen beauty. He'd hosted galas filled with models and celebrities. But Elena wasn't that kind of beautiful. She was the kind that made you forget the room had walls. "Gallery hours are over," Liam said, his voice even but firm. She smiled nervously. "I know. I just needed a moment. I had a rough day." Something about the vulnerability in her tone made Liam pause. "What brought you here?" he asked, curious despite himself. She looked around, eyes resting on the same painting he had been staring at, a woman caught between shadow and light. "I saw this piece through the glass," she whispered. "It felt like me." That was all it took. They stood in silence for a while, the kind of silence that stretches but doesn't suffocate. Then Liam surprised himself. "Do you want to stay for tea?" Elena's brows lifted. "Tea? That's unexpected." "I'm not a typical man," he replied, allowing a rare smile. She followed him to the private loft upstairs, where he kept a kitchen tucked behind bookshelves and canvases. The warmth of the space contrasted sharply with the outside chill. She wrapped her fingers around the mug he handed her, and he noticed the way she exhaled, like this moment was her first breath in hours. They talked. About art. About how she'd once trained as a dancer before injuries and bills buried her dreams. About how he once loved someone who turned love into leverage. And slowly the walls cracked. There was no seduction in his touch when he brushed her hair away from her eyes. There was no rush in the way she looked at his lips. But the tension between them built like a quiet flame licking its way up dry paper. "Why are you being kind to me?" she asked, eyes locked on his. "Because something tells me you need it," he said. She leaned in, or maybe he did. Their lips met with a softness that trembled, then deepened. His hand slid behind her neck. Hers grasped his collar. And for a moment they weren't strangers. They were two people who forgot they were broken. But just as Liam unbuttoned the top of her blouse, Elena pulled back. "I shouldn't," she whispered. "I barely know you." Liam's voice was low but honest. "Maybe that's why it feels right." She looked down, gathering herself, her breath shaky. "You scare me." "Why?" "Because I haven't felt something real in a long time." He didn't push. Instead he stepped back, giving her space, something most men never did. And in that moment, Elena decided to stay just a little longer. She didn't know then that Liam was hiding something that involved her. She didn't know that their meeting wasn't as accidental as it seemed. But time would reveal everything. And love would be tested in ways neither of them were ready for. Liam watched her sleep, curled under the soft throw blanket on his couch, the tea mug still half full on the side table. The storm outside had grown louder, but inside it was quiet. The kind of quiet he hadn't known in years. He should have told her. Right then. But how do you tell someone they've entered your life for a reason you've been running from? Earlier that evening, while Elena used the bathroom, Liam had pulled out the old manila envelope again. The one with her name on it. Elena Brooks. A file he wasn't supposed to open, but he had. And now, every second he spent with her blurred the lines between truth, obsession, and redemption. She stirred gently on the couch, pulling the blanket up, exposing a sliver of skin near her waist. Liam turned away. Respectfully. But desire had a voice, and it was starting to whisper. The next morning, Elena woke to the smell of espresso and the faint hum of jazz in the background. She blinked twice before realizing where she was. "You didn't leave?" she asked, sitting up. "I figured it would be rude to let a guest wander my apartment alone." Liam smiled, handing her a fresh cup. Elena sipped, then narrowed her eyes. "You know this could be seen as totally inappropriate." Liam tilted his head. "Do you feel unsafe?" He studied him for a beat. "No. That's the problem." They both laughed, and that laughter became the language of their next few days. It began innocently, a gallery invitation, an art class she took just to be near him. Then came dinners that felt like stolen time, soft touches over wine glasses, and stares that lasted longer than they should have. Elena felt herself falling, even as her mind screamed caution. And Liam, he was drowning in her without even knowing how deep the water ran. One night after a late dinner, Elena stood at his apartment balcony, wrapped in his blazer, her hair loose and dancing in the wind. "I used to think love was something that happened to other people," she said, not turning around. "But lately..." Liam stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Lately?" he asked. "Lately, I feel like something real is trying to find me." He kissed the back of her shoulder and she turned. Her lips met his, and this time there was no hesitation. They didn't rush. The intimacy was slow, like a poem written in candlelight. Every kiss was deliberate, every breath shared. He undressed her like she was fragile but kissed her like he was starving. Her fingers explored his back, memorizing every muscle, every scar. And when they made love, it wasn't about lust. It was release. Healing. Two broken people choosing, even if for one night, to believe in something whole. Afterward, she lay with her head on his chest. "What are you thinking?" she whispered. "That I'm not used to this. This. Feeling like I could lose something, if I mess this up." Elena traced a circle on his chest with her finger. "Then don't." But secrets don't disappear just because hearts want them to. Later that night, while Elena slept, Liam sat by the window with that same envelope in hand. Her file. Her history. Everything he wasn't supposed to see. Her father. Her mother. Face. The connection to someone he used to know. He closed the file and clenched his jaw. She couldn't find out. Not yet. Not until he figured out why their paths had really crossed. The problem? He was starting to care too much to ever walk away. The city moved on outside, but inside Liam's gallery, everything was changing. Not the awkward kind. The kind that hummed with something unsaid, anticipation, anxiety, and maybe a little fear. Emery didn't ask where they were going. She simply watched Silas, studying the curve of his jaw, the way his fingers drummed softly on the wheel like music still lived inside him. They arrived just after noon. The neighborhood was quiet, gentrified, a place that didn't know the tragedy it had once hosted. Silas parked in front of an old building with arched windows and ivy climbing the side. A conservatory, once grand, now quiet. He led her inside. No one stopped them. The halls were empty, echoes soft beneath their feet. He paused at a studio door marked with a bronze plaque. Studio 4C, read. He opened it slowly. Inside, the room was frozen in time. A baby grand piano sat in the corner, covered with a velvet cloth. Old posters lined the wall. Silas Reed, the prodigy. The gifted boy who'd once played Carnegie Hall at 16. Emery stepped inside carefully, reverently. Silas walked to the piano and pulled the small black cassette from his coat pocket. He turned to her. "This is the last thing I recorded, before everything ended." She nodded. He inserted the tape into a dusty player and pressed play. The first only static. And music. A haunting, delicate melody. Each note like a tear sliding down skin. A symphony of grief, beauty, and finality. Emery closed her eyes. She could feel it. Vain. The goodbye buried in every key. Then came something unexpected. A voice. Silas. Recorded years ago. Speaking. Crying. Breaking. "I should have been there. I left her alone. Because of a goddamn audition. I never got to say goodbye." Emery opened her eyes slowly. Silas stood frozen, jaw tight, staring at the floor. She reached for him, touching his hand gently. He looked up. "Who?" she signed. He swallowed hard. then slowly spelled the letters. "My sister." Emery stepped closer, pulling him into her arms. He trembled in her embrace. No sound. Just a man breaking open in the arms of someone who finally understood how to hold his pain. That night they checked into a small boutique hotel near the East River. Neither of them said much. But their hands never separated. Later, in the soft amber glow of the hotel room, Emery sat on the edge of the bed, removing her boots slowly. Silas watched her, the gentle grace of her movements, the quiet power she carried in silence. He turned to him. "You've carried that guilt for too long," she signed. "But you're not that boy anymore." He stepped forward, touching her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone, then her lips. She kissed his palm. There was no rush. No need to prove anything. They undressed each other quietly, not like lovers desperate to devour, but like artists unwrapping something sacred. His fingers moved along her shoulders. Her lips found his collarbone. When they laid down, it was skin to skin, breath to breath. And even though no words were spoken, everything was said. They moved slowly, two souls sinking in silence, writing love letters with fingertips, moans swallowed by moonlight. Her nails traced the story carved into his back. His lips worshipped every scar on her thighs. And when he finally collapsed against her chest, heart pounding, she ran her fingers through his hair and whispered in his ear. No voice. Just breath. Just being. The next morning, Silas stood at the window, naked except for a blanket wrapped around his hips. Emery walked up behind him, her body still tingling from the night before. She wrapped her arms around his waist. "I heard your voice," she signed against his skin. "I want to hear it again." He turned, looked into her eyes, and for the first time in 6 years, he whispered, barely audible, "You already do." They returned to Whisper House 2 days later. Everything looked the same, the weathered blue sign, the wooden bench, the salt in the air, but nothing felt the same. Silas had spoken. Just one sentence. Just one whisper. But to Emery, it was the loudest declaration she'd ever received. They didn't talk about what happened in the hotel. They didn't need to. The way he reached for her hand, the way she rested her head on his shoulder, it said everything. But peace is fragile. And someone was watching. It happened that afternoon. Emery was upstairs, folding a worn hoodie Silas had lent her when she saw the letter. Not hidden. Just sitting on the piano bench. Like it had been waiting for someone brave enough to read it. It was addressed to Silas. Dated 4 years ago. Signed by someone named Matthew Kane. She read the first line, and her breath caught. "I never meant to leave her alone. You have to believe that. It wasn't your fault." Her eyes skimmed faster. Paragraphs filled with grief, guilt, apology. Mentions of the night at the conservatory, of a fire escape, of running too late. "I should have stayed. I should have protected her from everything, including myself." And at the bottom, "You don't owe me forgiveness, Silas. But I need you to know. Claire loved you. Even when you left." Emery's heart thudded. Claire. His sister. But who was Matthew? And why did this letter feel like a confession? She barely noticed Silas entering the room until he froze behind her. His eyes fell to the paper in her hand. Emery turned. "You never told me someone else was there that night." Silas's face changed. Not guilt, something worse. Protectiveness. "I didn't want you to think I let her die," he signed. "You didn't." He sat down slowly. Then for the second time in her presence he spoke. "Matthew was her boyfriend. They were together for almost a year. I didn't like him. Said he was careless with her. They got into a fight that night. I left for a concert. He said he'd stay with her." His voice trembled. But he didn't. Emery sat beside him, placing her hand over his. "What happened to him?" "He disappeared after the funeral. No goodbye. Just vanished. I assumed he couldn't face me." She paused. Then reached into her coat pocket and slowly pulled out a worn photo. One Silas had never seen. A photo of her, much younger, standing beside a man with dark eyes and a lopsided grin. Silas's blood ran cold. "That's him," he whispered. "That's Matthew." Emery nodded. He's my half-brother. The words hung in the air like broken glass. Silas stood, reeling. How is that possible? Emery's hands trembled. My mom had a child before me. We didn't grow up together. We didn't even meet until I was 20. My family didn't talk about him. Not after what happened. Not after. She swallowed hard. Not after Claire. Silas stepped back like he'd been hit. So all this, the cafe, the bookstore, was it an accident? No, she signed, tears welling. Not at first. Silas turned away. Emery reached for him. Please. Let me explain. He didn't speak. Didn't move. She forced the words out. I came here because I wanted answers. I needed to know if what Matthew said was true, that you blamed yourself. That you stopped speaking because you thought you left her. Her eyes filled. I didn't expect to fall for you. Silas's voice broke when he finally asked, Did he send you? No. But he knew you were here? Yes. Silas stared at the floor, his hands clenched. You were the one person I let in. And you were tied to the worst night of my life. I know, she said softly. And I wish I could change how we met. But not how I feel. Not what we are. He looked at her, eyes broken. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything right now. Just, don't walk away. Later that night, Silas sat alone at the piano. He didn't play. He just held his sister's letter. And stared at the photo of Emery, next to the man he once hated most. Love had made him feel alive again. Now truth had left him speechless. It rained again on the day Matthew Kane came back. Emery stood at the edge of the bookstore window, watching a figure in a dark coat step out of a taxi across the street. Even after all these years, even through fog and distance, she recognized the way he walked. He hadn't told her he was coming. But she wasn't surprised. He always ran when it mattered. And showed up too late. Silas sat behind the register, a book half open in his lap, unread. Their eyes met. He already knew. She walked to him slowly. He's here, she signed. Silas nodded once. But the expression on his face didn't match the quietness of the gesture. He stood. Walked toward the front door. Opened it. And waited. Matthew crossed the road like a man heading into court. Posture straight, jaw tight, soul already surrendering. He paused 3 feet from the door. You look older, he said. Silas didn't reply. Matthew took a slow breath. I never meant for it to happen that way. You left her, Silas said, low, quiet but sharp as a blade. I panicked. He was crying. We fought. I said things I didn't mean. I thought she needed space. Silas's voice cracked. She needed you to stay. I know. The rain poured harder. The silence between them soaked everything. I wrote the letter, Matthew continued. I know it doesn't undo anything. But I needed to say it. Even if it took me this long. Silas looked at him, truly looked at him, at the man who had once held Claire's heart. At the man who failed to protect her the night she died. Then he said something Emery didn't expect. I've hated you for 6 years. Matthew lowered his eyes. I hated me too. But I think she'd hate me more for hating you forever. Matthew blinked, lips trembling. What does that mean? It means I'm tired, Silas said, voice steady. Of silence. Of ghosts. Of running from the parts of her I couldn't face. He looked at Emery. She brought me back. Not to the past, to now. He turned back to Matthew. I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm not going to let you live in my story anymore. Matthew nodded. A quiet understanding. I'm leaving town, he said. I won't bother you again. Before he turned, he looked at Emery. Thank you. For being brave. She said nothing. But her fingers brushed Silas's. A sign he understood without looking. Goodbye. That night, Emery packed a small bag. Just in case. She hadn't pushed him. She hadn't asked him to choose. But she knew what pain looked like when it needed space to breathe. Silas stopped her at the door. He didn't speak. Just reached into the inside pocket of his coat. A note. He handed it to her. She unfolded it. You didn't break me. You reminded me I could feel again. I don't care how we met. I care how we stayed. Stay with me. She looked up. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Then he signed it, slowly, deliberately. I love you. Her mouth quivered. She stepped forward, placed her hand on his chest. I love you too. They kissed at the door. Rain falling outside. Quiet all around. And in the stillness of that kiss, everything finally made sense. Weeks passed. The shop stayed open. Customers returned. And so did Emery. Every day. Not as a stranger. Not as someone hiding. But as someone home. Sometimes they still sat in silence. Sometimes they talked in signs. Sometimes Silas whispered words only she could hear. They danced once, barefoot on the bookstore floor. No music. Just heartbeats. And breath. And when the sun set over the water and painted the windows gold, they stood side by side. No more shadows, no more lies. Just a love that needed no words. As the truest ones, were always felt.